Welcome back to another episode of the Worthy for 30 podcast. I'm your host, Eric Tash. With me today is the co-founder of O2 Hydration, Dave Colina, coming to us from the great Tar Heel state of North Carolina. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and it's actually not hot as hell in North Carolina on this fine August day.
Look at that. Isn't that amazing?
No, amazing.
Yeah, usually
To
towards the
do
end.
this outside, man.
Yes. Our follow-up conversation will be outside. So in terms of, what we'd like to discuss on this episode is really give the audience members, the aspiring entrepreneur, the existing entrepreneur, the why and the how in terms of how you built O2 Hydration. I saw that you started in earnest in 2014. Now it's 2025. And really love to start on, where you were in your life in 2014 and what was that inflection point that you said to yourself and to your co-founder, like, we need to start something and it
Yeah,
needs to be this.
good question. What were my famous last words before starting a clean sports drink company? Well, maybe I can start with what O2 is and where it is today, and then we can kind of reverse engineer this. O2 is a clean and healthy sports drink that tastes awesome. That's basically it. And we're sold in several thousand different gyms across the country, ranging for your local CrossFit gym to your local Lifetime Fitness. And it's a favorite among people who kind of lead that health-oriented, performance-oriented lifestyle, but still want products that taste good. And that's what we're most well known for is to it's a clean, healthy sports drink that delivers twice as much electrolytes as Gatorade, but only 1 gram of sugar, and it tastes amazing. And so that's what O2 is today. That is certainly not what O2 has always been. It has not always been sold in thousands of CrossFit gyms and Lifetime Fitness studios. It used to be sold out of the back of my car, and it hasn't always been called O2. It used to be called Formula O2. So we've been through just a whole lot of changes to get us to where we are today, and I think that's part of the journey. But I didn't have any background in consumer packaged goods when I first started O2, and neither did my co-founder. We had no business starting a sports drink company. I met my co-founder when I was doing my first entrepreneurial project in late 2009, 2010 timeframe, something like that. I was working in corporate strategy at a financial services firm in Columbus, Ohio. And I was about 3 or 4 years out of college. And when I was in college, I used to do a ton of volunteer work and I loved it. And, I did all kinds of extracurricular activities. But then I joined the corporate world, the corporate grind, and there just weren't as many opportunities, it felt like. And I missed that. And so 3 years into my 5-year career in corporate, I partnered with my boss at the time to create a private nonprofit charter high school in Columbus. And the school is called Cristo Rey Columbus. It opened in 2012, 2013 was its first year. And it was the first time that I built something that wasn't just a PowerPoint. And it was something that was really, really meaningful and something that was and still is really impactful. And thankfully, we were not starting from scratch. My boss, Steve is his name. Steve had been on the board of the first one of these Cristo Rey schools in Chicago in 1996. Okay. And they built this really beautiful model where the Cristo Rey school would go into a really underserved part of town, usually a part of town that's graduating high school at 30-40% graduation rates tops. And they would provide high quality education in a way that was actually affordable by creating a job sharing program where each student would work 1 day a week at a company like JP Morgan or Nationwide Insurance or, name your large company. And they probably had Cristo Rey students rotating in and out. So they'd work 1 day a week in this environment. And in return for the labor, they'd get about $10,000 to $12,000 a year to apply towards their tuition. So Cristo Rey is able to bring in really high quality teachers as a result of that. And then Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation got involved in 1999, I think. And now there's a network of 30 of these schools, 30 plus across the country, and they're all graduating 99% or above in these parts of towns, including Cristo Rey, Columbus. So we had a template to work from there. And so Steve and I spent about 2 years getting the school off the ground. And that's a big job, like opening a high school. Who does that? Like that's a thing.
Right.
That's a big thing. And I still had my day job. And so I was working around the clock to get this off the ground. And as a result of that, I was drinking a tremendous amount of unhealthy sports and energy drinks. And that was just kind of how I was sustaining that lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
and they became a crutch for me. And I didn't come from a nutrition background, but I knew enough to know that, drinking a 20-ounce bottle of Gatorade and 2 Red Bulls a day probably was not great for me. You don't have to be a food scientist or a nutritionist to recognize that. And so unfortunately, I couldn't find anything else that I liked better. I've never really liked the taste of coconut water, even though I've really tried. And coffee gets old after a while, and I'm one of those people that I know I should drink more water, but I don't drink enough water because it's boring and it just doesn't taste like anything. So my co-founder and I set out to make a drink that could serve as a healthier option for us to replace all the sports drinks and energy drinks that were loaded with sugar and artificial ingredients that we were consuming. And so I left my day job in 2012. I started coaching, first martial arts and then CrossFit. And we started to do a bunch of formulation and packaging design. And we had this idea that we were going to create this Uber drink that was going to be like the end all be all. It was going to provide energy and it was going to provide hydration and it was going to provide, it's clean ingredient panel. And we created all that, we did all that. Like we made that drink.
Mm-hmm.
And that unfortunately is the easy part, like creating a really high quality product in food and beverage is hard. Don't get me wrong. And it took us a good 9 months of formulation iteration to go from having this idea to having a product that delivered that many electrolytes and only had 1 gram of sugar and had no artificial ingredients. Like that's a hard thing to do and taste good. That's a really tall order. But in the world of food and beverage, that's the easy part. The hard part is marketing, and the hard part is getting people to try it. We were fortunate in that we had a community around us in Columbus, Ohio, that we were pretty ingrained in within the fitness space, largely as a result of my my training background. And so when O2 first launched, we did a production run of 2 truckloads or so of this product that nobody had heard of, and it was like, oh my God, like I'm the only full-time guy on this project. And the doctor is still a doctor. He's working doctor hours. I'm responsible for selling all this product. What am I going to do? So like any scrappy entrepreneur, I started to sell it to my friends. And thankfully my friends owned gyms that had little mini coolers in them where people would buy a sports drink or an energy drink or whatever. And they started to buy O2. And 1 gym became 2 and 2 became 4 and 4 became 8. And by the end of the first year of O2's existence, I was delivering O2 to about 150 CrossFit gyms in the Ohio tri-state area, as well as all the Whole Foods in Ohio. And it was just a ton of fun, but a ton of work. And so we grew that way, kind of the slow and steady, scrappy way for several years. And ultimately we figured out a way to scale that and, to get me in a position where I was driving the company and not driving my car. But it took a lot of good old fashioned hard work and knocking on doors to get there.
And that's an incredible trajectory, from the initial idea to actually creating the product and then how to get the product into consumer hands. From there, it's also sounds like what you were doing up to that point, help culminate, help give you those skill sets to give you that confidence, that you can create a CBG product. What is the advice that you have for that aspiring CBG founder that, it's like, well, my resume or my LinkedIn doesn't really match up to what, I really want to do?
Yeah, I would actually say that was more the position that I was in, which was my resume and my LinkedIn did not match up at all with what I was setting out to do. I thought it might match a little bit,
Hmm.
like I was in strategy, corporate strategy, and then I transitioned into marketing. I thought that was going to be a good fit, but it had nothing. The stuff that I was doing in a Fortune 100 company has nothing to do with the stuff that goes into building a brand from 0 to 1 or 1 to 10.
Hmm.
So the advice that I would give is just like learn as fast as possible. Read as many books as you possibly can on the subject material. And I'd also encourage people to surround yourself as best you can with people who have been there, done that with respect to what you're trying to do. I've had some mentors over the years that have been really helpful, that have built and scaled food and beverage brands. It takes time to cultivate those relationships, and it takes a lot of energy. And I unfortunately didn't have a huge network when I started this, but they're out there.
Hmm.
People who can, kind of help you avoid the pitfalls and give you some advice based on what's worked for them, and get advice from people who have a right to give it, so to speak. But also you got to surround yourself with people who are in the trenches with you too, like doing things in non-competitive industries, but
Hmm.
at a similar stage. Find people you can suffer with and find people who you can commiserate with. I actually just fairly recently launched an online coaching community about a year ago for early stage CPG entrepreneurs called CPG FastTrack.
Hmm.
And I was approached to start this by a good friend of mine who's a co-founder of a brand called Four Sigmatic. They're a high 8-figure brand that has been built over the last 12 years that largely pioneered adaptogens in the United States. And I met this guy randomly. He and I were sponsoring the same podcast in 2015, 2016, and the podcast host introduced us. We became fast friends, and I would pick his brain on things and he would pick my brain on things. And there's probably a dozen or so people that I've met over the years like that, but I've met them all by fate. I've met them all by random encounters. And so he approached me about a year and a half ago, to put together a network of CPG operators that takes fate out of that equation. So we built this online coaching community for people at an early stage so that we can surround them with people like themselves who they can commiserate with and get
Hmm.
advice from, in addition to getting advice, from people like myself and Marcus and others who have been there, done that. So you got to get qualified advice. If you're a first-time entrepreneur or second-time entrepreneur in a new space, you got to get good at finding qualified advice from people who have been there, done that, and from people who are also building businesses around your same stage right now.
Gotcha. Okay. And then you mentioned, 0 to 1, 1 to 10, so for the layperson, 0 to 1 is from the idea to actual, like, maybe it was that a minimum viable product. So getting that
Yeah.
first can in the hands of
Yep.
consumers. What are those, what, like, looking back to the beginning of O2 hydration, what was that 0 to 1 for you and your co-founder?
We tried to be as cheap and scrappy as we possibly could to prove out we had a good idea. And so we started we actually started out by renting kitchen space at a restaurant in Columbus, Ohio, that was not being utilized on Sundays, and making this product by hand based on ingredients that we bought on Amazon and our local, craft brewery supplier, a homebrew supplier, and mixing it together ourselves and coming up with flavors ourselves. And the product, it tasted awful. We were very clearly not food scientists. Like, the product tasted like flavored ocean water. And we packaged it ourselves in glass bottles, because glass bottles you can buy, you know, in small quantities, versus cans you have to buy in very high quantities. We did the packaging ourselves to save money. So we were selling this stupid looking, terrible tasting product out of the back of our cars and out of the back of this restaurant, but we noticed people kept coming back for more. And it wasn't because the taste, it was because the efficacy. And I finally decided to, like, fully leave my day job and put the rest of my life savings into what ultimately became O2, when I heard that the Ohio State men's basketball team was buying it by the case and using it, in practice and in games. And I'm like, okay, well, as an Ohio State alum myself, I think that's pretty cool. And so that's when I decided to go all in on O2. And that's really what got us from 0 to 1, was just doing it ourselves on a shoestring budget and seeing if people would come back for more. Like, it's easy to sell somebody something once in this space, but you gotta make sure they come back for more to have an actual business. And so once we saw that, then that's when we decided we could go from 0 to 1.
So once you had a product that was sticky to, to what you were saying in terms of, people coming back to buy more, how do what would you say to the person who's like, yeah, I got my brand off the ground and I'm putting some money on, and then this is getting tactical, on Meta and Instagram and Google, versus, again, you're a brand guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what would your advice be to create that moat? Because O2 hydration is differentiated from the other recovery drinks in the market.
Right. Honestly, I think most moats are created in CPG by marketing, not by product. And I say that as somebody who came up with a very unique product. But like, the thing that's most unique about O2 is something that we don't even talk about anymore, because it turns out it's not much of a moat. O2 is called O2 because it's infused with oxygen. So if you take a dissolved oxygen meter and measure the oxygen content of O2, it's about 50 parts per million. Normal tap water is about 5 parts per million. And so we infuse 10 times more oxygen in our product than normal tap water. Why is that important? Because there are all kinds of scientific, peer-reviewed medical studies that show ingesting oxygenated fluids helps your liver process toxins faster. That's why that's important. But that's kind of a mouthful, right? And it's definitely something that's not common knowledge, which means it's definitely something that people have to be educated on, which means it's definitely something that you have to spend time and money on educating. What we found over time is that most people outside of our circle of core crazy customers were drinking O2 not because it's super infused with oxygen, but instead because it's a clean label, low sugar, no artificial junk ingredient hydration product that tastes good. And so we just decided to lean into that. And I think that the most successful products today are not super innovative. Like, sometimes you get some crazy innovation stories, like Olipop was first on the prebiotic scene and they exploded their brand. But Poppy was right behind them with selling the same thing, kind of the same idea. And their moat was just marketing and brand. And I think more often than not, as a CPG entrepreneur, you have to become very, very, very good at things like packaging design and product positioning and product architecture and pricing and meta ads. Like, it's the same stuff over and over again that we coach people on in CPG FastTrack. You just got to get really, really good at product marketing, not product development. Most people can make a great product, believe it or not. It's fairly easy to do that. But it's really, really hard to make a great product that telegraphs how great it is through its product and marketing.
Gotcha. Yeah. For the people who are listening, and I imagine you discuss this and teach this at the CPG Fast Track, online course, Dave, that you and your the other operators and your founder that you mentioned do, is the 4 P's of marketing, like the product, the place, the price, the promotion.
That's right.
Because when it comes to online distribution, so to Dave's point, you can easily, like, you and I, when we get off this recording, we can set up our own Shopify store, and we can find possibly a private label manufacturer to create a drink, and we would just have to provide them a label, and then we can post that or host that product on a Shopify store by this evening, right? But it's a totally 100%. Different story when it comes to actual brick and mortar distribution.
Yeah, and honestly, it's totally different. Like, anybody can make a product and anybody can spin up a Shopify site, but it's very, very hard to make a Shopify site that converts cold traffic at high volumes, and it's even harder to build a brand that can be successful in a retail environment. So generally what we coach people to do within CPG Fast Track is, avoid retail until you've built a brand that's 10 million or more in revenue and has a strong level of awareness, because it's just going to be too expensive to succeed otherwise. O2 tried to scale retail far too early. We did a small test in Whole Foods that went really well, and then they put us regional, and then that was okay. But it was only okay because we didn't have the people on the street to make sure that people were going into Whole Foods looking for O2, that it was always in stock, that the shelves always looked good, the shelves always had price tags. Like, it's these little
Yeah.
details that you think happen automatically in a retail environment that don't. You would be shocked how often I'd walk into, whether it's a Whole Food store or a Kroger or a King Super or whatever, and see our product either out of stock because it's sitting in the back and nobody has merchandised it, or it doesn't have the right price on it. So you have to have people that work for you, not these companies, doing stuff like that in order to make retail successful. And you have to have enough volume going through the retailer to be able to make sure that that's a good investment, hiring people to do stuff like that, which means you have to have a high level of brand awareness. And I think the best way and the best place to build brand awareness today is online, but unfortunately, it's really hard. It doesn't happen just by spinning up a Shopify store. You have to become great marketers. You have to become really, really good at getting people to your site and buying from your site. That's the hard part, because everybody's trying to become really, really good at getting people to buy from their site, right? Like, we're gonna get off this call and we're gonna be served meta ads for Poppy and Olipop,
Yes,
because
we
they're
are.
trying to, and everybody's getting fed ads all the time. So how do you stand out in your marketing in a way that competes? Your product is going to be great, but your marketing is what really has to punch above its weight.
Right. And, speaking of that and getting into that, word of mouth has been, a big benefit, right, for O2 hydration,
Oh yeah,
the CrossFit Box network and CrossFit.
yeah,
So, yeah, talk to us about that groundswell or that lightning in a bottle that you're able to,
yeah,
again, create, not overnight, but over
yeah,
time, that
yeah,
has helped, these
yeah.
folks be your evangelists.
Right. We were lucky, because if you look at, like, the brands that are really good at what I just described, let's look at the brand that's the best at what I just described. Liquid Death is the best at what I just described. Liquid Death is a marketing agency that employs former SNL writers to create its ads, and they are the best. That's true, by the
It is
way.
true. Yes, it is true.
They are the best at driving awareness and driving conversion, whether it's in store or online. They're just incredible. O2 is not that. O2 has never been that. O2 is a few scrappy people from Columbus, Ohio, trying to figure this out as they went along. And we got lucky in that we found a different way to build awareness and build online sales. And we just happened to fall into it because I just happened to be a CrossFit coach who just happened to have a bunch of friends who own CrossFit gyms. And so like, I would love to tell you this as part of my grand plan, was to build a network of CrossFit gyms that sold O2. And as a result of selling O2, people started to buy it online because they could get O2 auto shipped to their house instead of having to remember to bring it to the gym or buy it at the gym, whatever. Like, that was just luck, man. Like, I found quickly that if I sold O2 in CrossFit gym members would continue to buy it from the gym, and they would also buy it from me online. And if I sold O2 to gyms surrounding a Whole Food store, that Whole Food store would do really, really well selling O2, because CrossFit gym members shop at Whole Foods and they would buy it at Whole Foods too. So we found a channel first marketing strategy, which is really rare, but possible too. We weren't the first ones to do it, and CPG FastTrack actually has some customers, or some clients of ours, that have had success with that approach too. But you have to find, regardless, we're all trying to do the same thing, which is acquire new customers affordably. How are you acquiring new customers affordably? O2 is doing it because we leveraged gyms to be our discovery, our place of discovery. And that discovery translated into online sales. Liquid Death is leveraging funny media to be a place of discovery, and it's leveraging that into retail sales. But how do you, as a brand owner, find and figure out how your product is going to get discovered and ultimately bought affordably?
Right, because if you're managing a profit and loss statement, it gets very expensive when it
really
comes to,
quickly.
yeah, very
Very
quickly.
easy to spend a lot of money in CPG.
Yes, because again, it's all about attention, right? To your point,
Totally.
all brands are competing against O2 hydration to break through the noise and
Right.
to stand out and to resonate with that intended consumer. Again, the other part of the Worthy for 30 platform is you're doing well, but you also are doing good. Talking about those CrossFit boxes, take us back
Hmm.
to the pandemic when
Yeah,
COVID
yeah,
shut down all those boxes and how to hydration became
yeah.
a real
That
real
was
bigger
really
partner.
that put us on the map in a lot of ways. I always feel guilty saying that, but 2020 was like the highlight of my career. It was awesome. We we did O2 has always been a values first organization, a mission driven organization, which is funny to say as a sports drink company. But when you start to like really look at O2 as a company, it starts to make a little bit more sense. I started O2 um, well after I'd created an LLC called Live Well. Before I knew I wanted to get into the drink business, I knew I wanted to get into the business of helping people live better lives. And ultimately, my mechanism for that became a clean, healthy hydration drink. And once the clean, healthy hydration drink was launched, I knew we needed to have some values that reflected my own personal values that would serve as kind of a template for the types of people we would work with and the types of people I would hire and that sort of thing. And those values ultimately got distilled into three words: honesty, humility, and hustle. And that's not just like a poster that we have at the virtual O2 office. That's like it's printed on the side of every can. And it's part of what we live and breathe at O2 is everything that we do with honesty, humility, and hustle. And in 2020, we were doing most of our revenue from gyms. And that was great because, gyms were a great part of our retail operation. And, we were doing, I think, low six figures in D2C sales a year. So it was a nice to have, but our lifeblood was really the gyms.
Hmm.
And come February, I started to hear some rumblings that made me worry about that a little bit. And then come March, I started to worry about that a lot. And eventually the gym shut down. And there are gyms that are making a good amount of money just by selling O2. And that, when gyms shut down, that income for those gyms disappeared because you can't sell a product if you're not open for business, right? In addition to their core income, which is gym memberships. And so we knew that, our largest client base was under threat. And we had gotten to know hundreds of these clients on a personal level. Most of them, like Lifetime Fitness was going to be fine, but the CrossFit gym down the street from you, it's a question mark. Can they survive this? And so we created a program where first we said what we noticed, if I could take a step back, what we noticed after the gym shut down in
Hmm.
March was that our D2C sales went way up. And it was very clear that people were they were used to buying O2 from their gym and they couldn't get it from their gym anymore. So they were just going to buy it from us instead. Okay. Good
Hmm.
for us, right?
Good for
Good
us.
for
Yeah,
us,
yeah.
but really not good for the gym.
Yeah.
Kind of unfair for the gym retailer that would otherwise have been capturing those sales. So we created a program called the program purely because we thought it was the right thing to do, where we said 50% of all profits from every online sale that we get are going to be donated back to that purchaser's local gym. So we basically came up with a bunch of different coupon codes that could tie back to a bunch of different gyms that we were working with that were closed. And if somebody entered, CrossFit Reignited as their coupon code, we would donate 50% of the profits from that sale to CrossFit Reignited, so on and so forth. That skyrocketed our D2C sales. I mean, that overnight took us from, I can't remember what we were doing in a month, but not much, to six figures, multiple six figures in a month. So that felt good because we were able to, cut a check to some gyms for some pretty meaningful numbers. But I knew that wasn't going to be like the solution. that wasn't going to keep anybody in business. That was just kind of a thanks for being you sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so after March, we started to think about what could we do to help gyms retain members, particularly in light of the fact that they're still shut down. In April, gyms were still shut down. And so we partnered with a few other brands that have a big gym following and created a program called Stay for May, where our brand and three other brands all agreed to pitch in for $100 gift card that every gym member in America would receive if they kept their gym membership open, active for the month of May, hence the term Stay for May.
Stay for May, right.
And that was something that we, again, felt like it was the right thing to do. We weren't sure how it was going to be received, but we ended up having thousands of gyms participate in Stay for May. I think up north of 100,000 people participating as gift card recipients for Stay for May. And what was a low six-figure D2C business for us became a mid seven-figure D2C business for us almost overnight. And so that campaign put us on the map. And that campaign also, we know because they told us, helped keep many gyms in business. And thankfully, come June, July, gyms were starting to reopen again. So it served as a bridge
Mm-hmm.
to keeping a membership base active, and at least to an extent where many gyms were able to keep the lights on. And we had many gyms tell us, hey, this was the thing that kept me from shutting the business down. And that campaign ultimately won Marketing Campaign of the Year. In the beverage category, we beat out brands like Ocean Spray. They had like a popular TikTok campaign with a guy drinking Ocean Spray on his skateboard, and some other big name brands, just by doing the right thing. And that felt really, really good.
Wow.
That's why I refer to 2020 as the highlight of my career. It's great to be able to do good and grow your business at the same time.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're living proof of that. So what do you like, have you ever gotten into a conversation with another entrepreneur or another, executive at a large, company that has influence, or who's like, yeah, like I'm, we're doing well, or I want to, like, the company's doing well, but I don't think I have time to do good or
Mhm.
to help, or, again, some of the things that you just mentioned that of course they were
Yeah.
aligned to the business, but what's your, if that person and you were talking and they said that, like, what would your response be?
I think my response would probably be you need to think a little bit harder about that decision because eventually you're either going to be forced to, and it's going to be too late to fully capitalize on it, or somebody else is going to do it instead, and they're probably going to put you out of business. I think now, thankfully, there's a certain level of expectation that people have, particularly of smaller, newer startup brands, that there has to be, like, you can't. It's not enough to not be evil. I think that used to be Google's, and won't be evil. Okay, yeah, don't be evil, but also do some good, you know, particularly if you're Google or have aspirations to be Google. So I still feel there's an opportunity for brands to address some major societal problems, most often packaging related, like O2, for example. Most of our competitors are in single-use plastic battles, and we're in recyclable aluminum cans, and we like that. And that's on purpose, and we're going to continue doing that because we believe in that. And, as a result of our being able to say we're in single use or we're in recyclable aluminum cans and the competitors in single-use plastic bottles, that captures people's attention, and that makes people think twice. And it's not the only reason that a lot of people drink O2, but it's our reason that a lot of people drink O2. Liquid Death is another good example of that. I mean, their values are printed on the side of each can, and it's death to plastic. And I think that a lot, like, not everybody's drinking Liquid Death because they hate plastic water bottles, but a lot of people are,
Mhm.
and that's been a big part of their brand for a long time. So I think that if a brand or a company of any size doesn't have some program or some part of their business that is actually positively contributing to society, they're going to be forced to do it, or they're just going to be too late. And you don't want to be forced to do it. You want to be able to capitalize on it. Liquid Death capitalized on it. O2's capitalizing on it. You want to be ahead of the curve, not a fast follower or behind the curve. And I think that there's, for better or for worse, business drives society. Business has to have the most impact on society, at least in the United States. It's not nonprofits, it's not government, it's capitalism. And if you're really wanting to change the world for good, the best way to do that is through business and capitalism. And now there's a unique opportunity because people really appreciate businesses that do good.
Right. So the two follow-up questions on that. One, again, let's say you're starting O2 hydration today and there's a mission-driven component. Like, what would your steps be? Like, what would those initial steps be to help to put yourself on a path to make that mission come to life? And two, you mentioned, some of these startup brands, mostly
Yep.
online brands, are more conscious and deliberate in terms of doing good and being mission driven.
Yep.
Shout them out. Like, who are some of the the brands that aren't getting
Yep.
that are getting love but aren't getting as much love as they should be getting?
Yeah, there's one that comes to mind, and I think this is a good example too. It's a brand that's in our CPG FastTrack community. I was just talking with her the other day. The brand is called Sun and Swell. Sun and Swell. And they make clean, healthy snacks. But that's not their core point of difference. Their core point of difference is they make clean, healthy snacks in completely biodegradable packaging in an industry that's dominated by completely non-compostable single-use plastic packaging. And it's funny because they really struggled with a long time. What do we emphasize to our customers? Is it our snacks are super clean and healthy? Or is it that our packaging is stuff that you can buy and not feel terrible about? And what they found over time is their core customer, their core route to market became business to business. And so think like, Google headquarters carrying Sun and Swell, or your cafeteria at school carrying Sun and Swell. And those guys cared about the clean, healthy snack component, but what they really cared about, particularly in California, which is where they're based, is the sustainable packaging. And so that's a brand that found their point of difference through a unique channel with a very unique proposition, and their customers basically told them what was special. And so now they're very much leaning into that with their channel, and they're having a lot of success in the B2B space because they're like the only brand of their kind that's in clean, sustainable packaging. There's a lot of clean, healthy snack brands out there, but most of them you don't feel very great about buying because you're contributing to single-use plastic waste. So that's one that comes to mind. If I were doing this from scratch, I'd start with the product, like Sun and Swell did, for example. Start with the packaging. I think it'd be really, really tough in 2025 to defend a product that's in single-use plastic, just based on what we know about the environment, what we know about microplastics. Like I think that single-use plastic is the devil, and you should do everything you can to minimize its use in your product. And I would also clearly articulate your company values. O2 did that super early on, and I made them very easy, and they all start with the same letter, for God's sake, so they're pretty memorable. Honesty, humility, and hustle. But every major decision that we've ever had to make, including Stay for May, including the 2020 50-50 campaign, we did it through the lens of honesty, humility, and hustle. And if something doesn't line up with those values, don't do it. And if something does line up with those values, then it's a good indicator that you should at least look at it.
Wow. I think this is a great place to stop, because this is amazing, because and this is perfect. Know your values. Know your values. Do the core fundamental value exercise. Get it on paper. Figure it out. And then if you're starting a business, ensuring that your personal core values align and vice versa. And then whatever you're doing, make sure that they're aligned to those values. Because again, to your point, Dave, and you said it in many different ways, consumers can see through bullshit.
Totally. That's a great way to put that. Yes. Yeah. So don't just talk about it, be about it.
Be about it. Exactly. This is amazing. I'm going to include in the show notes, Dave, your O2 Hydration's Instagram handle, your LinkedIn profile, the website where you can find and buy O2 Hydration near you. And then CBG Fast Track, is there a link?
Yes. CBGFastTrack.com, include that too.
Yes.
If you're an entrepreneur who's either thinking about getting into the CPG space for the first time, or you've got a brand that's anywhere between 100,000 in revenue to all the way up to 10 million in revenue, and want some company and want some qualified, good advice from people who've been there, done that, and to be surrounded by a network of people who are doing what you're doing too in non-competitive industries, hit us up. We're always looking for good people trying to do good things, and it's a great network of support for entrepreneurs.
I love it because again, it's you've built, you've grown, and then at the same time, you can do both at the same time. Is give back to the next class
That's right.
of the up and coming entrepreneur. And I'll also include, again, Dave also talked at length about package design. The recent Entrepreneur Mag article about
Oh yeah.
Ocean Hydration's evolution, packaging
Yeah.
evolution. I think it's a great, a primer. As you're thinking about, especially if you're a CPG entrepreneur, thinking about
Yeah.
packaging.
It's funny. One of my co-founders in CPG FastTrack is the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. And just by way of our relationship, he featured O2 in 2020 as part of this campaign. We became friends. Then we co-founded CPG FastTrack. He's become like a packaging expert himself. And so that article does a really good job of highlighting the things that are really important for anyone's packaging. And he's also a coach at CPG FastTrack too, that people could have access to.
Look at that. That is awesome. So again, you're again, if you apply, if you want to get involved with CPG FastTrack, you're gonna be surrounded by a lot of seasoned, experienced CPG product and marketing experts,
And just good people too.
just
Like
good
we
people.
don't just take anyone. We only take people who are just really good people. So it's a magical thing. It really is.
Yes. It sounds magical. Again, if I was starting a CPG business, the CPG FastTrack
I
would be
would.
much. Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely,
Again, I built it for myself. I just wish I had it 10 years ago.
exactly. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that
That's
amazing
how it
though?
works.
And how it works. But so again, people. I don't want to be cynical. I think it's a great thing, but I would also think that there's the other side of the coin where the person becomes successful and they don't think about those things. They don't think
Yeah,
about like how do I give
I
back.
agree. I agree.
So
Don't be that guy.
don't be that guy. Exactly. Dave, it's been a pleasure. I thank Jeff Ragavan for putting us in touch, which is great. And I think you and Jeff met through Bordy.ai, which has
Yeah, that's right.
gotten has gotten tremendously better. I don't know if anybody, if
Has
you've,
it? Good.
yes, they
I
migrated.
need, I need to reschedule my calls with Bordy.
Yes, it migrated to ChatGPT 5.
Nice.
So it definitely knows knows me better.
Okay,
Is more
good.
contextual, more comprehensive in its response. So highly recommend. I'll also include a link to Bordy.ai. Dave, it's been a pleasure. Stay cool for the remaining weeks of summer, and we'll talk
Thanks,
soon.
Eric. Sounds good, man. Look forward to it.
Let's see, are we